Hello and welcome. My name is Victor Gijsbers and I teach philosophy at Leiden University in the Netherlands. In this video I'm going to take a look at the article called Is Epistemic Luck Compatible with Knowledge? Written by Mylan Engel Jr. and it's from 1992. So I will start by explaining a little bit what this idea of epistemic luck is. And then we're going to see that Engel, in the central sections of his article, makes a distinction between two kinds of epistemic luck. And he argues, I think quite convincingly, that one of them is and the other is not compatible with knowledge. So there's one kind of epistemic luck that makes sure that you can't have knowledge, and another kind of epistemic luck that has no such consequences. And then, and to my mind much more problematically, we're going to look at the argument that Engel sets out in the first and last section of his paper, where it turns out that according to Engel, his ideas about epistemic luck prove that a position called externalism is right. But more about that later on. So, what is epistemic luck? Right? Epistemology is the study of knowledge, so epistemic luck is luck that has to do with knowledge. And in particular, we talk about epistemic luck when it seems that what somebody knows or purportedly knows or has a kind of good belief about is based not on their skills as an investigator, you could say, but on luck. And I think the most famous example here would be cases where you just believe something for no good evidence whatsoever, but it happens to be true. Right? I mean, suppose that you believe that Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system because you just like the god Jupiter. I mean, that's, maybe that's why you believe it. Well, you would be right. Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, but it seems that you don't have knowledge. Right? I mean, you don't really know that Jupiter is the biggest planet in the universe. You have a belief, the belief is true, but that it's true is in a sense a matter of pure luck. You didn't have any good, reliable evidence. You had no justification whatsoever, really, for believing what you believed. And so there seems to be a kind of luck going on here. And because the truth of your belief is merely lucky, because of that, we might want to say, you don't actually know it. Right? You don't actually have knowledge. Now, this is not the way that we have to phrase our conclusion. Right? We could say, well, you don't have any justification and that's why you don't have knowledge. Right? We don't have to use the word luck. But the term luck has been adopted by epistemologists and they use it in different kinds of situations. And some of them at least have suggested that luck, epistemic luck, is incompatible with knowledge. So in every situation where you are somehow lucky in having a relatively good epistemic position, that epistemic position must fall short of knowledge, because knowledge is something that doesn't require luck. Right? You can have knowledge even without luck. You have to be in such a good situation that you didn't even need luck. I mean, that's when we can talk about knowledge. So that's the basic underlying idea here, the background against which Engel is writing his article. So, what Engel does in the central sections of this paper is he distinguishes between two examples of epistemic luck and tells us that these examples have to be analyzed in a totally different way, so different that we should absolutely not just talk about luck, but talk about two different kinds of luck, which have a very different status in epistemology. And so one example that he talks about is an example from the original article by Edmund Gettier, Is Justified True Belief Knowledge? And Gettier famously argues that justified true belief doesn't have to be knowledge. Somebody could have a belief that is true, they could have good reasons for that belief, and still fail to have knowledge. And one of the examples that Gettier gives us is this. There's this guy called Smith, and he has a colleague, and the colleague is called Jones, and Smith believes that Jones owns a Ford car. Right? He believes that Jones owns a Ford car because he has seen Jones drive around in a Ford. Jones has told him about the Ford he owns, and so on and so forth. But actually he's mistaken. Maybe Jones is putting up a charade or something. I mean, he's lying about his Ford. He just borrowed it from someone. He doesn't actually own a Ford. Okay, but Smith believes it, right? So Smith has a justified false belief that Jones owns a Ford. Now, based on that justified false belief, Smith, does some logical reasoning. And he says, well, if Jones owns a Ford, right, then it's also true that Jones owns a Ford, or my colleague Brown is in Barcelona. I have no idea why Smith engages in this kind of reasoning, but he can, right? And it's fine, logically speaking. If Jones owns a Ford, then it's also true that Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. So now Smith believes that, right? He believes Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. And he seems to be justified in believing that because he was justified in believing that Jones owned a Ford, and he did some good logical reasoning, which is also justified. And this belief turns out to be true because Brown happens to be in Barcelona. Right? Brown just happens to be in Barcelona. That's a little piece of luck, you could say, for Smith, because now his belief turns out to be true. But Gettier told us it's not knowledge. Right? It's not knowledge because come on. I mean, if you have this weird kind of reasoning and you do it because you believe that Jones owns a Ford, then even if what comes out of the reasoning is true, it still shouldn't count as knowledge. Okay. One way of analyzing that is to say, oh, well, Smith doesn't have knowledge because the truth of his belief is just lucky. Right? It's just lucky for him that Brown is in Barcelona. He didn't have any evidence for that. It's just lucky for him. That's why it's not knowledge. Again, I don't think you have to analyze it that way, but you could think, luck is a useful concept here. What's wrong with Smith is that the truth of his belief is too lucky. Okay. So here's the second case that Engel talks about. In this case, somebody lives in a country, somebody is called Jill, I believe. Jill lives in a country where the president is shot. I mean, he's dead. And there's a reporter on site who sees it, writes it up, rushes it off to the newspaper, and the newspaper publishes the president has been killed. And Jill reads it and believes that the president has been killed, and it seems that, she knows, right? I mean, it's a justified true belief. However, the situation is slightly more complicated. The ruling party, fearing chaos, doesn't want anyone to know that the president has been shot. And so they set up this elaborate fake news campaign, which looks very convincing. So all the other newspapers, which received the directions from the government slightly later than this first newspaper got the true story, all the other newspapers and the 8 o'clock news and every other news source says, oh no, the president wasn't shot, a Secret Service member was shot. All right. And so basically everyone in the country believes that the president is still alive. Because maybe they've heard about this one newspaper that said something else, but that's just one voice among many, and all the other media are telling us that the president survived because somebody else was shot. Now here's the idea. The idea is that obviously people who believe that the president is still alive, they don't have any knowledge, right? Because they have a false belief. But what about Jill? I mean, Jill believes that the president has been shot because she only saw this newspaper. And then this evening, right, on other evenings, she always watches the news shows on television, but this evening she didn't. She didn't check her phone. She's offline at the moment. I don't know. I mean, and that's why she still believes that the president has been shot. But if she had seen any of these other news sources, she would have given up her belief. Now, according to this example, Jill doesn't know that the president is dead. Right? It's too lucky. Right? Her belief that the president has been shot, she only has it because of luck. And the luck here is that she didn't turn on the television, didn't check any news websites on her phone, didn't talk to anyone who was watching that stuff, and so on and so forth. Right? There seems to be so much luck involved that even though she has a justified true belief that came from a great source and so on, still she doesn't know that the president has been shot. So again, luck incompatible with knowledge. All right, here's what Engel tells us, and it seems to me that he's right. He tells us that these are two very different cases and that only one of them has been analyzed correctly. He says, look, the Gettier case, that's correct. Smith right? He needs extraordinary luck for his belief to be true. He doesn't know. So let's call that kind of luck that has to do with truth or verity, right? Another word for truth. Let's call that veritic luck. And let's say that veritic luck, right, when you really need some big luck in the world for your belief to even be true, that veritic luck is incompatible with knowledge. Right? That seems solid to Engel. But on the other hand, there's this other case where Jill is kind of lucky. I mean, she is lucky that she didn't get all this misleading evidence. Right? A lot of people got misleading evidence. She didn't get misleading evidence. That's kind of lucky. But the evidence that she has is perfectly good. Right? So why wouldn't that be enough for her to have knowledge? Right? And then Engel gives us some other cases where people are kind of lucky in the evidence that they have. Right? Suppose there's somebody who always works inside in a windowless room in order to really concentrate on writing their novel. But unfortunately today there's something wrong with that room. They have to work in another room where there are some windows, and they see that it's raining outside. Okay, so getting this evidence of rain is in a sense very lucky for them. Right? I mean, they could also have been working. In fact, almost all the time they are working somewhere where they couldn't see the rain. So it's lucky, in the sense of unlikely, that they would get this evidence. But now that they have it, it seems perfectly fine, right? I mean, if they happen to see the rain, yeah, I mean, that's some great evidence that it's actually raining, and so they surely know that it's raining. And I think Engel could actually have come up with many other stories where it's very lucky maybe that we have a certain kind of evidence. It could be extremely lucky that I stumble across the lost city of El Dorado as I cross the jungle of South America. That's very lucky. But I mean, once I see it, this city made of gold, I have some pretty good reason to believe that it's there, right? So luck doesn't seem to be incompatible with knowledge if it's luck about the evidence you get. And so Engel calls it evidential luck. And he says, look, I mean, if you need to be really lucky for your belief to be true, well, maybe we don't want to call it knowledge. So that's incompatible with knowledge. But when you've been lucky in the evidence you received, that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Jill receives the good evidence and not the misleading evidence, and so she reaches the right conclusion, and she has knowledge. And there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that. All right, so I happen to think that Engel is basically right about this. I think if you compare these cases, they are very different. It makes some sense to make a distinction between needing luck for your belief to be true and needing luck for getting the particular evidence that you got. But I mean, once you see that there are these two different kinds of luck, it makes some sense to say that the first might be problematic for knowledge and the second not so much. All right. But Engel wants to use this as a step in a bigger argument. And that is an argument about internalism and externalism. So what is internalism and externalism? Internalism, as Engel defines it, is the idea that justification is a purely internal matter. What does that mean? Well, suppose that I wonder whether I'm justified in believing something. Or suppose that you wonder whether I am justified in believing something. Internalism would say that the only thing that matters for whether I am justified in believing something are things to which I have access. So it's things like my experiences, my beliefs, like only things that I can access from the inside. Those depend on, I mean, that's what being justified depends on. So one could also say something like this. Being justified means that you really did your best, or something like that. Right? I mean, given what you had, given your evidence, like your experiences and the way that like what you think about the world and so on. I mean, given all of that, if you drew the best conclusions you got based on what you had, I mean, that is what being justified is. That's what the internalist would say. And so what Engel tells us is that internalists can never make a strong connection between, on the one hand, being justified and being true. A belief being justified and a belief being true. There can't be that kind of truth connection, because Engel says, I mean, from the inside, everything can be all right, even though you're wrong. And he brings out Descartes' demon to prove this. Right? I mean, suppose that I have the experience of looking out of the window and seeing the rain across the window pane, and I see the clouds and I hear the rain, and like I have a lot of great internal evidence for believing that it's raining. Yeah, but maybe I am in a world where this Cartesian demon is sort of giving me all these sense impressions, even though there's no rain. Or maybe I'm a brain in a vat, and the brain scientists are giving me these impulses that make me think that there's rain, even though there's no rain. Right? You can think of these skeptical scenarios. And so these skeptical scenarios, for Engel, they show that internalism can never make a strong connection between justification and truth. Right? Something can be justified, it could still be false. So, if I'm an internalist, I have to believe that if I'm justified in having a belief, I still need luck, right, for it to be true. The truth of my belief, given the fact that I'm justified, is still a matter of luck. Because it could also be the case that it's false, given these very same justifications. So what does the externalist say? Well, the externalist is somebody who thinks that being justified doesn't just depend on internal factors, it also depends on the world. And so a very common, simple way of thinking about externalism would be this. You're justified if your belief is formed in a way that usually leads to that is reliable. So you are justified if your belief was formed in a reliable way. And reliable means that it usually, for the most part, leads to true beliefs. So if I use the way of gaining belief that usually leads to truths, then I'm justified. And maybe I don't know that, right? So I, living in a world where there's no demon, and I have these nice real sense perceptions, I live in a world where sense perception is reliable, and so conclusions based on sense perception are justified. This other unlucky guy who lives in this demon world lives in a world where sense perception usually leads to false conclusions, because the sense perceptions are all fake, right? So it's a world where sense perception usually leads to false conclusions, and so you're not justified when you use sense perception. We can't know it, right? I mean, I am lucky that I'm the one who gets the good evidence, and he is unlucky that he's the one who gets the misleading bad evidence, the sort of non-justifying evidence. But so there's still luck involved, right? I'm lucky about the evidence, and he's unlucky about the evidence. But once you have the evidence, there's a connection to truth. Right? Once you have the evidence, there's a connection to truth, because evidence by definition, justification by definition, is something that reliably leads to truth. Right? So if I have justification, there's necessarily a high probability that I'm right, because that is how the externalist has defined justification. So there is, for the externalist, a connection between justification and truth, while for the internalist there can't be that kind of connection between justification and truth. So that's the setup. And now, Engel tells us this. He says, okay, so we had these two kinds of epistemic luck, veritic luck and evidential luck. And we said veritic luck is incompatible with knowledge, and evidential luck is compatible with knowledge. Now, in the case of the externalist, the kind of luck that I need is evidential luck. I need to be the person who gets the evidence that is really justificatory, right? Which means that it is reliable and that it leads to the truth. Hopefully, I'm the guy in the real world and not the guy in the demon world. And that means that from an externalist perspective, I get this, I have this luck, this evidential luck. But I don't need any veritic luck. Right? I don't need luck in order to get to the truth, because my beliefs, being justified, I'm so lucky about being justified. But being justified, they are guaranteed to lead to the truth, or at least they are guaranteed to have a high probability of leading to the truth. So I don't need any veritic luck. Well, if I need evidential luck but not veritic luck, what we saw in our examples is that that's fine. And so an externalist can acknowledge that we have knowledge. But for the internalist, things are bleak. Because for the internalist, right, what I need, I have justification, that's great, I can check it out, I don't need any luck for that, because I just need to do my best. But then I need luck to get to the truth, right? And luck that you need to get to the truth, we have seen, says Engel, that's incompatible with knowledge. And so the internalist has to be a skeptic. The internalist has to say that knowledge is impossible. Nobody wants to be a skeptic, and so externalism is better than internalism. Being justified is a matter of being in the right world, so to speak, not a matter of doing your best. Now, I think that this part of the argument isn't very good at all. I think it's not very good at all because, well, first of all, the fact that we needed to make a distinction between veritic luck and evidential luck does not show that we have made all the distinctions we need to make about luck. Yes, it is true that in the case of Gettier, right, where Smith needs luck, so to speak, I mean, he needs Brown to be in Barcelona for his belief that Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona to be true. He needs Brown to be in Barcelona even though he doesn't have any evidence for that. I mean, that's a kind of luck and it has to do with truth, right? And we can't call it veritic luck. That's okay. That doesn't show that any kind of luck that you need in order to get to the truth is of exactly the same kind and is as incompatible with knowledge. Right? If I'm an internalist, I would say, well, look, you can do your best, but of course the world has to cooperate to a certain extent. So suppose that I have all this evidence that Jones owns a Ford and he actually owns a Ford. Well, clearly I needed some luck. I mean, I could have been wrong. I mean, you could always be wrong. So you always need some kind, a bit of luck. But there doesn't seem to be any problem here, right? If I have checked, like I have seen Jones driving this Ford, I've heard him talk about his Ford, maybe I've even sort of seen the contract, maybe he faked it, but he had a contract showing his buying of a Ford or something like that. I mean, I can have greatest evidence in the world and I still need a little bit of luck that this is not one of these bizarre situations where I'm being misled. Why should that be incompatible with knowledge? Right? Why should that be incompatible with knowledge? The fact that there are situations where being lucky undermines knowledge doesn't mean that being lucky always undermines knowledge, because there might be very different kinds of luck involved or very different amounts of luck involved, and it is completely unclear from what we've seen in the article that there is a sort of general claim that we could make that whenever there's something lucky about your knowledge, you can't, or something lucky about the truth of your beliefs, you can't have knowledge. I don't think Engel has shown that at all. In fact, if he has shown it, then externalism is going to go down into skepticism as well. Because externalism, there is no guarantee in like standard versions of externalism, including the one that I and Engel discussed, that if you have a justified belief, it's going to be true. Right? Using a reliable method is a way of having a high probability that your belief is true. But if there's only a high probability that my belief is true, I still need a little bit of luck to be right. Right? If I've got 99% chance of having a true belief, there's still that 1%. And I need a little bit of luck to be in the 99% and not in the 1%. So externalism seems to require some kind of luck to get to truth as well. Like using a reliable method is great, but it doesn't always work. And I need to be lucky to the extent that I'm not in one of these rare cases where it doesn't work. So if we put all luck that has to do with truth under this banner veritic luck, and then say that it's incompatible with knowledge, then everything is going to go down as far as I can see, except for some kind of people who think that we have infallible insight into reality. Everything is going to go down. And we haven't been given any reason to believe this. I mean, we have seen some examples where you can talk about veritic luck and you don't have knowledge, but that really doesn't show that all types of luck that we can identify are going to have this same effect. Indeed, I think that like the very example that Engel uses in order to convict the internalist, the example of the Cartesian demon, generates some very serious questions about whether we shouldn't be making a lot more distinctions in our thinking about luck, right? Because what is the luck that I need in order not to be in the Cartesian demon situation? Well, it's not like the kind of luck that Smith needs, right? I mean, Smith needs some luck, namely he needs Brown to be in Barcelona. I mean, that's just some event that can happen, and if it happens to you, that's well, I don't know whether it's nice, but in this case, at least it gives you a true belief. That's a little bit like the kind of luck that you have when you find a 10 euro bill in the street, or when you catch your bus, because although you were late, the bus was late as well. I mean, maybe that's a little bit like that. But now if somebody comes to me and says, wow, Victor, you are really lucky to not be living in a world that doesn't exist, but there's just a Cartesian demon. I'm not sure what that's... I mean, yeah, I'm kind of lucky that that's not the case, but was it ever really a possibility for me to be living in a world like that? I mean, now we're more in the territory of somebody who comes to you and says, oh, you're really lucky not to be living in the High Middle Ages during the Black Death. You're like, it's pretty nice to not be living during the Black Death. But I mean, was it really a possibility for me to be living during the Black Death? Is that like, wow, I'm so lucky that I managed to avoid that? No, I don't. I mean, you can use the word luck here, but it just doesn't seem to be the same kind of luck as the one with the bus, which you just catched in time, because living in the Middle Ages is just not the same kind of possibility as the possibility of missing the bus. One is a thing that can happen to me on a sort of daily basis, and the other is something that I'm not even sure it's compatible with being me. I mean, could I have been born in the Middle Ages? Or just somebody a bit like me? I mean, this is unclear. Now, the way that Engel sets up this story, he says, oh, there are all these possible worlds, and in some of them there are Cartesian demons, and you're really lucky to be living in this world. It's not like I was going to be born, and then there were all the possible worlds, and I had to roll some dice, and I was, oh, phew, I wasn't put into the Cartesian demon world. I mean, it's not like that. I don't know whether you can even talk about luck here. You certainly can't be talking about luck here in the same way as you did in the Gettier example with Smith and his friend Jones at the car and so on. So I just don't think that these few examples that we've been looking at give us a full overview of how we should think about luck. Right? Yes, it's useful to distinguish veritic and evidential luck, but we need to make a lot more distinctions in order to sort of really understand what luck is and what role it has to play in epistemology. And to not do that and then just, bam, claim that you have shown that internalism must be false while closing your eyes for very similar problems in externalism, that doesn't seem like a very good argument for me. So, as far as I'm concerned, is epistemic luck compatible with knowledge? Does show us that Jill knows that the president is dead, but it definitely doesn't show us that internalism is wrong. And so Engel's mission has been partially successful, but not entirely successful. There's a lot more to say about epistemic luck, and this article is from 1992. A lot of work has been done on that in the 33 years since this came out. It's a topic I'm somewhat interested in, maybe gonna do some work on in the near future, so there might be more videos about that. no promises. I hope you enjoyed it.